the co-manager of the international institution of defending the human rights. She's going to talk generally about the human rights situation in Iran. And some friends in Facebook have asked us, because there are many, we don't have so much audience here because there is a parallel event where Mr. Kofi Annan is speaking, but many are following us through Facebook. Please, thank you so much. My speech will be about a report about human rights. According to numerous reports from various human rights institutions and the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Human Rights on the affairs of Iran, the human rights situation in Iran is getting worse every day. The number of executions, arrests, amputations known as Islamic punishments, and increasing use of threats and discriminations all go to show that human rights and human values are totally irrelevant to the ruling system in Iran. Today in Iran, virtually all voices of opposition are suppressed by the security agencies, to the point that even the Iranian president objected to the current situation in his recent September 13th government meeting, where he stated, "We should live in a safe and secure society and not in a security-imposed society." However, as 40 years of experience has shown, the use of oppression and use of force in order to secure the society does not work. Hassan Rouhani's words, in fact, go to show that the atmosphere of the society is one that is completely based on oppressive imposed security. Today in Iran, the only way left for the prisoners of conscience and those who are in prison for their belief is by endangering their life through an ever-growing number of hunger strikes that we see. For a typical example, one only need to look at the number of prisoners who are on hunger strike in Rajai Shah prison of Karaj, who in the past few weeks, because of their deplorable conditions, have attracted the attention of many international political and human rights organizations, who in response in their statements called on the Iranian regime to address the demands of these prisoners, who are simply requesting the most basic rights due to any human being. Tehran's prosecutor, in response to these demands, simply replied that the judiciary would never pay attention to these strikes and will never alter their policy towards these prisoners. Reza Shahabi and Dr. Mehdi Khazalis are examples of these types of prisoners of conscience who are reported to be in very critical condition due to long periods of hunger strike, which were at times dry hunger strike. Moreover, Mahmoud Beheshti Langrudi, the former spokesman of the Association of the Teachers Union, who was arrested again on September 11th, is also on hunger strike. Furthermore, clerics who are independent of the state are not in much better position than other political prisoners. For example, Ayatollah Nekunam, who is 69 and with various illness, seems to be transferred to daily to the hospital only to be later returned to his cell over and again, despite the order of the doctors. The health situation in Iranian prisons is so poor that it leads to gradual death and disability of prisoners. A typical example is the case of Alireza Rajai, a reformist journalist who, owing to the lack of medical examination during his imprisonment, not only lost an eye but also lost part of his face. Furthermore, Arash Sadeghi and Zainab Jalalian are both in a serious condition and should have been hospitalized many months ago for treatment, and yet prison authorities have repeatedly opposed their transfer to the hospital. Additionally, despite recent election promises, gender, religious, and ethnic discrimination and persecution remains rampant in Iran. Women's rights violations in today's Iran are not just about imposed hijab, but women in our country are even deprived of the right to enter stadiums. All the while, Syrian women at the same time are allowed to attend the same stadiums that the Iranian women are banned from. All these are only a very small example of the violations of Iranian women's rights. The situation is such that Muhammad Yazdi, the secretary of the Qom Seminary Teachers Society, has requested that the status of women in relation to the presidential post be officially declared in such a way that in Iran women can in no way become president. In fact, judging by the current makeup of the Iranian cabinet, the president of the country cannot even have a female minister, and all this is clearly a sign of the misogynist principles of the Iranian regime. In relation to ethnic discrimination in Iran, it is merely enough to look at the provinces of Sistan and Balochistan, Kurdistan and Khuzestan, and the status of the people in these provinces to see real examples of ethnic discrimination in Iran. For example, we only need to look at the brutal murder of ethnic Arabs in Ahvaz and Kulbaran in Kurdistan, and Iranian compatriots of Sistan and Balochistan under the pretext of smuggling to see the truth of ethnic discrimination in Iran. Religious and ideological discrimination also persists. The continued violation of the rights of Baha'i, Sunni, Sufis, and other religions and schools in Iran clearly shows the depth of this tragedy. For example, Sunni compatriots still have no mosques in Tehran, and their mosques and their places of worship, which was demolished by radical groups over the last few years, have never been investigated. The Iranian regime also continues to create difficulties and obstacles for the Nematullah Qonabadi Sufis. For example, the head of the Qonabadi Sufi order, Mr. Noorani Tabande, is still prohibited from visiting his home and birthplace Qonabad. Furthermore, after 12 years since the destruction of the Sufis' house of worship in the cities of Qom, Buruj, and Isfahan, there has not yet been any official investigation. Yet another example of a gross human rights violation in Iran is the reintroduction of the death sentence for Mr. Taheri, which was reinstated purely through the pressure exerted by the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, even though Dr. Taheri has completed his 5-year prison term and has now been in jail for almost 2 years after the end of his original 5-year sentence. Mr. Abdul Fattah Sultani's case is also another example of brutal treatment of a brave Iranian lawyer who has been sentenced to 13 years in prison, who is also in a critical condition. All the while, prison authorities seem to be completely ignorant of his condition. Another example of violation of human rights by the Iranian regime is threatening journalists and civil, political, and human rights activists abroad. For example, the case of the overseas independent journalist Ruhollah Zehzam, whose life has been repeatedly threatened by the Iranian security forces, and many members of his family have been targeted to harassment of the Iranian judiciary, who have repeatedly filed false charges against him and have frequently arrested his family members, including his brother, who is still in prison. It is easy to see in the course of this short account and through the number of examples given that violations of human rights in Iran is not only widespread, but it is continuous. These violations are in effect the systematic policy of the ruling regime in Iran, which unfortunately means the human rights conditions in Iran are getting worse day by day.